Welcome to day 3 of the Green Style Raglan Sewalong. Today we're back and we're going to work on finishing the neckline of our raglans. So I'll be demonstrating in these videos how to sew on a neckband. This is a really great technique to master if you're a beginner or if you feel like you never get your neckbands quite right. I'll be demonstrating how to attach the cowl, which is part of the Women's Centerfield add-on pack. That add-on pack also includes a 3-piece hood. I'm not going to have a video for that, but it is pretty straightforward. So, of course, if you have any questions, I'm more than happy to answer them. And finally, I'm going to be showing a video for how to assemble the hood on the men's Hudson because it is a unique hood. So I will be showing you how to do that as well today. I also have a bonus video at the end for how to get started on installing the quarter zip on the men's Hudson, which you can use with the hood. So if you're interested in doing that, you want to check that out. It's just a quick little tutorial that kind of gives you the steps that you need. Sometimes it's just helpful to have a visual in addition to the pattern illustrations. So I'll be adding that on to today as well. So please make sure to comment with your progress posts after you've watched this video. Let me know if there was anything that was particularly helpful for you, if you have any questions, and then we'll be kind of on the home stretch. Tomorrow we'll just be finishing off the wrist openings or the arm openings of our tops and the hems, whether you're adding a band or just hemming. So we'll be doing that tomorrow, but for today we're going to focus on the neckline area and finish that off. So if you're ready, I'll take you down to my cutting table and we'll get started. So if you're going to be adding the neckband to your raglan, whether it's the men's, which is what I have here, or the women's Centerfield, you're going to have one neckband piece. Now, it's important to make sure that your neckband has enough stretch and recovery. So what do I mean by that? That means that when you pull it this way, it goes back. It doesn't, the curling is okay, but it doesn't kind of stay stretched out when you do that because you're going to be pulling this over your head a lot. It's going to need to be stretched. So you want to make sure it has enough stretch and recovery. Fabrics like interlock, some cotton knits do not have enough stretch and recovery for a neckband. They might for the shirt, but they wouldn't for the neckband. So you just want to make sure that your stretch and recovery is going to be pretty good when you're looking at making a neckband. So the first step is going to be to fold it in half, right sides together, and you're just going to sew along this seam. I usually use a straight stitch on my sewing machine here. I don't use my serger because it kind of creates some extra bulk. So I like to be able to sew a stitch with my sewing machine and then be able to press it apart nice and flat so it's not creating bulk in the neckband. So go ahead and do that. If you should be, your neckband should end up being about between 80-85% of the opening of your shirt. So it's included on this pattern. If you've altered the opening of your neck in any way, you're going to want to go ahead and measure along the seam allowance or the seam line of your shirt and then multiply that by 0.85, 0.80 to get the right measurement to cut your neckband piece. And then before you cut, you're going to want to add on a seam allowance, 3/8 of an inch times 2. So make sure that you've done that if you've altered your neck in any way. If you haven't, you can go ahead and just use your pattern pieces. So I'm going to go over to my sewing machine and I'm going to sew this seam, press it open, and then I'll come back and show you how to apply it to the neck of your shirt. So I've got my neckband sewn, kind of did a quick finger press on that seam, and you should also already have the center front and the center back clipped. If you didn't clip those when you cut your pattern pieces out, you can do this really quickly. Just match up the sleeve seam, clip right in the middle, match up the back where the sleeve seam is, and then clip in that middle. Now you're going to want to find the quarter points of your shirt, so those are halfway points, by matching up the front and the back and then clipping exactly halfway between. And I'm just making a tiny little, 1/8 of an inch or so clip here. You don't want to be clipping quite a bit. You could also put a pin in, but my pins tend to fall out and then I've lost my quarter point. So you're going to want to find the quarter points on your neckband now. So first you're going to want to fold it in half with the wrong sides together. So for this, I do actually usually use some clips. You can press it if your fabric is friendly to pressing. My fabric has some rayon in it, and I'm always a little bit hesitant to press rayon knits unless I really have to, because sometimes they get shiny. So I folded it where the seam was, and then I put a clip in the opposite edge, and then I'm going to put those two clips together. See, my fabric doesn't want to stay folded here. And I'm going to put a clip over here where those two, the opposite edge of where those two meet, and then I'm going to put a clip over here where the opposite of those two met. If that makes sense. Okay, so now I've got my neckband in quarters and I've got my shirt in quarters. So here's my seam. The one that's opposite to that, I'm going to put at the center front. And that seam is going to go in the center back. And then the clip that I marked at the quarter point is going to match up to that quarter point, which should be somewhere on the sleeve, but not necessarily half of it. And then the same on the other side. Now at this point, I always kind of stretch it. Make sure that you're going to have to stretch the neckband a little bit. You want the neckband to be shorter than the shirt, but you don't want to have to stretch it so far that it's going to pucker. So I just like to go around all my 4 points and make sure that I'm not having to stretch so far that I'm maxing out the stretch of the neckband, and it looks pretty good. So I'm going to go ahead and serge that onto my shirt. Don't forget to use your 3/8 inch seam allowance. Now, if you are sewing the hood onto your Hudson, it's going to be a little bit different. But if you're using the neckband like I am, you're just going to go ahead and sew that on now. And after you sew, you always have the option of adding a row of top stitching here. So now you should have a neckline that's nice and top stitched on. One place that you could add an extra touch here if you wanted would be to add some twill tape to the back, just the back neck area. Sometimes I do this. I'm not going to do a video for it, but I'll probably go back and do it in a minute. And it just prevents the shirt from stretching out. My husband has kind of a interesting method of taking off his shirt where he pulls on the back, from the back to get it off, and adding twill tape or some sort of stabilizer along the neckline would just kind of help prevent that area from stretching out if it gets pulled. The likelihood is if your fabric has good stretch and recovery, it'll probably be okay, but that is a little optional extra touch, and if you look on Ready to Wear, they often have that along the back. So that's the banded neckline. Let's talk about the cowl. If you're adding the cowl to your women's center field, which I am, you'll have a piece that you cut out that looks like this. It's got some kind of up and down curves here, and then at the top, it's just kind of one big arc. And so what you're going to want to do is place your pieces right sides together and sew with your 3/8 inch seam allowance along that top arc. And then you're going to fold it together, and I'll show you how to do that in a second. But the bottom down here, this is going to become the neck opening, and this is going to be the front of the cowl. So I'm going to go over to my serger. I'm going to sew that, and then I'll come back and show you what to do next. So you sewed along this top arc. Now what you're going to want to do is, keeping your fabric right sides together, you're going to flip it so that that seam is kind of in the midline, and you should have a straight edge along the side here. And so there'll be a curve at the top now and a curve at the bottom. So again, you're going to want to turn this. You're going to stick a little pin or a clip here to make sure that those seams stay together. And then you can go ahead and serge that. Now something to note is that if you sew these seams with a sewing machine, you can press them more easily. You can definitely press this seam and the seam when you're after you sew it, but if you sew it with the serger, you're just pressing the bulk to one side. Whereas if you sewed it with the sewing machine, like I showed you with the neckband, you would be able to make a much flatter seam here. So that's just an idea that just adds another little nice touch to your neck. But I'm gonna go ahead and sew this seam right here, and I'll be back to show you how to fit your cowl onto your neckline. So now you should have a piece that has a seam here and a seam in the middle that goes around to the other side. You're going to turn this so that the wrong sides are together. So you're going to match them up like this. Match up those two seams. Just flip one side over the other, almost like you're putting a pair of socks together. And then you're going to pin it or clip it all the way around. And this is going to be what attaches to the neck opening of your center field. So, got that. You just want to make sure to clip it all the way around so it stays even. And that seam is going to go in the center back of your top, and the opposite edge will go in the front. So now I have a tube like this, has a seam on one end and an opening on the other. So you can identify where the center back is. For me, it's for you too. It's going to be where that seam is. And then the center front is going to be just opposite of that. So hopefully you marked those points on your shirt so that then you can grab your top and attach it. Okay, so here's my top, and so far I just have the shoulder seam sewn. So I still need to make that clip in the center front and the center back for this one. So I'm going to go ahead and do that now. And then we can just stick our cowl inside of our shirt. Again, lining up that seam with the center back. And that other clip with the center front. And then finish clipping it all the way around. And then you're just going to sew that with your standard 3/8 inch seam allowance, and you should end up with a very nice cowl neck to finish off the opening of your top. Now the last thing that I'm going to show is the hood for the men's raglan, because it's kind of an unusual construction. The Centerfield add-on pack has the option of a hood included, but it's pretty standard. It's a 3-piece hood, which is cool, but you just sew the 2 pieces to the middle piece and you're good to go. The men's just has a different shape, and it's kind of a fun lining and hood in one. So I'm going to be back with showing you how to assemble the men's hood in just a minute. So if you're sewing the women's center field, now you've got your cowl all in place, and all you're waiting on now is to finish off your sleeves and your hem tomorrow. Now the center field does have an option for a hood. It's a nice 3-piece hood, but it's pretty simple. So if you have any questions, feel free to ask me, but I wasn't going to do a video for that one in particular. I am, however, now going to jump to the men's Hudson and the hood for that, because it's a fairly unique kind of piece. It's got a cool curve, and instead of cutting 2, which you would usually do for a lined hood, you're just going to be cutting 1. Now you want to pay attention to this front line. It says to cut on the fold here at the outermost edge if you're planning on omitting the zipper. If you want to add the zipper, you're going to cut on the dotted line, or I'm sorry, you're going to cut, have your fabric on the fold line here. So it's either going to be the outer edge for the fold, which is without a zipper, or the inner edge on the fold with the zipper. Because if you're using the zipper, you're not going to overlap your hood by half of an inch. So It's just moved in a little bit there. This line here is important to note. This is the center top of the hood. So you're going to be folding that together to get your hood shape. So you're going to cut out one of these on the fold. And I'm going to show you my piece that I've already cut. So what you should end up with is a large piece that has this kind of like V shape or mountain shape there, and then another one on the other side. So what you're going to want to do is just fold on that center fold line, right sides together, so that that V shape ends up lining up perfectly here. And you're just going to clip down along this edge and sew that with a 3/8 inch seam. I'm going to add a couple of clips here so it doesn't shift out of place. And then on the other side, it's going to be the same thing. You're going to have that little part that's cut in. You're going to fold, and I wouldn't mark that center fold line. I think that you can find it just fine just by folding your fabric in half. So I'm going to add some clips along here, and this is also going to get sewn with your 3/8 inch seam allowance. So the hood is a great option for the Hudson if you don't want to do a neckband. You can add the hood, and you could do it with or without the zipper. So there, I'm going to sew here, and on the opposite side I'm going to sew here, and then I'll come back and show you what to do next for the hood. So now I've sewn right up to that fold here, and I've done the same thing on the other side. Now we're going to turn the hood right side out, and we're going to match these seams together. So it's going to go like this, and like this. It's kind of hard to demonstrate the video. But that's going to end up being the back of the hood. So there's going to be a seam along the outside back of the hood, and also a seam along the inside back of the hood. Okay, but you're not gonna, that seam is not going to continue all the way to the front of the hood. So you would put your face in this part. Your face would be sticking out here. And now it's just a matter of clipping this together along the bottom and either overlapping it a 1/2 inch, and I usually like to add a little basting before I attach it to the neckline to make sure it stays overlapped the right amount, or just butting it right up against itself if you're going to be adding the zipper to the Hudson. Okay, so one way or another, you should be finishing the neckline of your raglan today, either with a hood or a cowl or a band. I hope these videos were helpful for you. Please do go ahead and post your progress photos in the comments and let me know how you're doing and which option you've chosen to finish your neckline. And then tomorrow we'll be back and we'll continue by just simply hemming our tops. Go ahead and adding cuffs to the sleeves or the bottom, or a band to the bottom, or hemming and, you know, just turning under simply. So I'll see you back here tomorrow, and have a great time sewing. So I decided to add one more video today showing you how to do the zipper on the Hudson. This is a fun option if you just want kind of a 1/4 zip top, or even a 1/2 zip top. And I think that zippers tend to intimidate a lot of people. So I'm just going to do a quick little tutorial on how to do the zipper for the Hudson. If you wanted to modify the center field, you could certainly modify it to add something like this. There's no reason why you couldn't take the same techniques and measurements for the Hudson that I'm going to show you and use them for the center field. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. Coincidentally, this is also a similar method that's used for the Pacific pullover. So I've got a zipper here, and I'm just using this for an example, so I'm not really giving my husband these wild colors. But I pulled a zipper out of my stash. You're going to want to grab one. There's suggestions in the pattern for a 6, a 7, or an 8-inch zipper. And if you've lost the packaging, which I often do, you're just going to want to measure from the top of the zipper stop to the bottom of the zipper stop. Mine's 7 inches. This is a 7-inch zipper. So you're going to want to cut a rectangle of interfacing that's about 3/4 inches wide by that length of your zipper plus 1/2 inch. So in my case, I have a 7-inch zipper, so I need a 7.5 inch piece of interfacing. Now, it's also helpful before you begin to fold your shirt in half and iron a crease or draw a line down. I really like these friction markers, so I just went ahead and drew a line down. But if you really want to, you can also iron a crease just to make sure that you're being accurate. So you're going to want to measure, and you want to also add a little line. It's hard to see, but I've added a line about 1/2 inch down. You want to make sure that you stop 1/2 inch from the top of your shirt so that you have enough room to sew on your hood. Okay, so go ahead and flip your top to the back and attach your interfacing along that center line. So I'm going to go to my iron. I'm going to iron this on, and then I'm going to use my scissors and cut down the middle until I get to 1/4 inch from the bottom, and then I'm going to cut out in kind of a V shape. Okay, sort of like a snake tongue there. All right, so you're going to fuse this on and then snip down and then V out. So I'm going to go do that, and I'll be back to show you what to do next. So after you've pressed your interfacing to the wrong side, you're going to grab your zipper, and I like to start by sewing it to the bottom. This is a little bit different than in the instructions, but I find that it gives me a nice finish. So I just sew like right above the zipper stop. You can see the tiny little zipper stop here. I just sew back and forth across that tip, which ends up being like a little triangle right here. And that way, when you flip it up, you've already got the bottom of your zipper done. So then I'm going to attach my wash away wonder tape here on the left hand side, and I'm going to just press my zipper in place there and stitch along here. And then when I'm done with that, I can do the same thing to the other side, making sure that my zipper remains lined up in the same spot on both sides at the top. And then you can press out and top stitch along your zipper opening. And remember that you want to make sure that your zipper remains about 1/2 inch below the top of your shirt. If it ends up a little bit off, looks like mine's a little too far, you can always deepen the neckline a little bit. It won't make too much difference on the hood. But that's how you're going to be sewing in the zipper. And then when you get your hood ready, this one doesn't have the shoulder seams sewn yet, so you would usually do this before you had sewn any of the sleeve seams. But once you had that on there, you would go ahead and attach your hood to the neckline, and you'd be ready to go. So I hope that's been helpful in kind of demonstrating how the zipper is attached. If you have any questions though, let me know, and I'll be happy to help.